Prabowo had a very dark, difficult and disturbing history. He's been a public figure, a household name in Indonesia for nearly 40 years because he was the head of the special forces in the Indonesian military. He married the daughter of the president, Suharto, and then he used his power in the last years of the Suharto regime as a kind of regime enforcer and was accused of all sorts of human rights abuses, kidnapping protesters, having dissidents killed, and all sorts of other depredations. And the US refused to let him in, refused to give him a visa for many years until he became, just a few years ago, defence minister because of those alleged abuses, which he's always denied. So this is the persona, and he's projected himself as angry and divisive. He's played the Muslim card, he's played the Chinese card, the race card. He's been a very angry, divisive figure for a long time. But then he decided, after 2 unsuccessful tilts at the presidency, that it wasn't enough to get him across the line and he would never be president. He's now 72. And so, as you say, he moderated. He decided, I can't beat this Jokowi guy, he's too popular, so I'm going to join him. Literally, he joined the government of Jokowi, became Jokowi's obedient, cooperative defence minister, became disciplined, moderate and mellow and reasonable, and to the point where they've joined forces to the point where Prabowo, now running again for the presidency, has accepted as his vice presidential candidate, wooed as his vice presidential candidate, Jokowi's son. And the son carries with him the same mantle of popularity and credibility that the father, the outgoing President Jokowi, has. And so that's imported now to Prabowo's campaign. And that made Prabowo the lead contender, by far the front runner in this race. And Prabowo is now swearing, affirming left, right and centre, day in, day out, that he will continue the policies of Jokowi. Jokowi set the template. He's enormously popular. It's been successful with the economy. He's been less encouraging with some of the rundown of democratic practices and institutions in Indonesia, but the country is stable and successful. And Prabowo is saying, I will continue all of Jokowi's programs faithfully. This is my program. So it does at least portend a continuation of the status quo, which for most Indonesians and certainly for Indonesia's neighbours is a pretty promising picture.
Yeah, and Australia among them. What does it mean for Australia's relationship with Indonesia? This has been they're critical obviously to us in the region. Have we made the gains that we would have liked from a business perspective, from an investment perspective?
The short answer is no. Australian companies have always been slow and reluctant to invest in Indonesia. Indonesia, although it's strategically enormous for Australia, it straddles all of our northern approaches across, thousands of kilometres, 17,000 islands. Nearly half of all global commercial shipping goes through Indonesian straits. It's an unbelievably important swing state, potentially in the great contest between the US and China. And yet, it's also just a place that Australian companies and popular culture, apart from going to Bali, has overlooked. So the two governments have now started talking about trying to more strategically generate a better business and economic relationship. It's early days. It's a hugely underplayed relationship. The government is trying to, on the strategic side, improve things as well. Trying to negotiate a new defence treaty with Indonesia. And we have 2 federal cabinet ministers now who speak Bahasa Indonesia, and they are Penny Wong and Chris Bowen, and that's new. So, it's a promising relationship, but it's always been promising.
And under delivering.
Yes.
You talk of China and the huge investment it's made in Indonesia. Could it be problematic, and if Prabowo is president, could it be problematic if China were to start asserting itself a little bit more?
Yes. Indonesia, as you know, has a proud history as a leader of the non-aligned movement during the Cold War, siding neither with the US nor the USSR. And still basks in that national self-image and reputation, very reluctant to take sides. It's got Jokowi, Indonesia generally, has been very happy to take Chinese investment, which has been huge. But at the same time, China's navy has occasionally been encroaching into Indonesian territorial waters and received a very, very tart and angry response from Jokowi. So, they've got a difficult relationship, but they'll try to preserve that strategic neutrality as long as they can.
You've also pointed out that Jokowi presented himself as sort of anti-establishment. He was anti-establishment. He was going to upend the prevailing order. But in fact, he is now just as, with his son now as vice president, potentially, he's just created yet another political dynasty.
Yes, it's quite a transformation from the humble everyman, just an ordinary guy, to now, as you say, creating and sustaining a political dynasty. And through his son, as you said, very likely going to be elected as Prabowo's vice president, Jokowi now has the opportunity and intent of using that to extend his influence into the next administration and through the whole power structure in Indonesia. This is, I suppose, the mark of a very successful and crafty political operative, but it's also very disappointing and a betrayal to the goals of the Indonesian democracy movement. And remember, Indonesia has only been a democracy for 24 years or less since its first free election. And one of the goals of Reformasi was to prevent the re-emergence of dynastic politics, of oligarchs, rich people, big power blocks influencing politics. And here is Jokowi creating an entire new dynasty, and bitterly disappointing a lot of the idealists and believers in the value of independent democratic institutions. So it's both a compliment to Jokowi's political skills and a disappointment to the believers in the goals of the Reformasi democratic movement.
Yeah. Well, we'll watch and see if it plays out as the script appears to be. Good to have you on. Thanks, Pete.
Pleasure, Bev.